Hi, I'm Casey Bennett, and this is my permaculture design submission for the Geoff Lawton 2014 online PDC. The goals of this permaculture design are primarily to increase food security and sustainability while beautifying the land and creating some excellent natural areas for spending quality time with family and friends, and to harness as much of the land's water potential as possible to reduce or even eliminate irrigation inputs. The goal is to provide as much food as reasonably possible for a family of 5, including 2 children. The site's a little under a half an acre in a suburban area outside of the city limits in west central Indiana. The USDA hardiness zone is 6A. It's a temperate, fairly humid environment. We expect usually around 40 inches of rainfall in the non-winter months, and 10 to 12 inches or so of snow in the cold of winter. Since we are in the northern hemisphere, I'm going to go ahead and orient our map so that the sun will be radiating its energy toward us. Speaking of the sun, at its highest point in our year, it is around 72 degrees as far as angle, solar angle, and its lowest point is around 28 degrees solar angle. The slope of the property is incredibly gentle and is primarily in a north-south direction. The house itself is actually positioned almost on a ridge line, or a micro ridge line on sort of the east to west axis, where the contours flow down the north and southerly directions, which is incredibly advantageous for doing design on the house or on the property. To that end, let's start by reviewing some of the earthworks. We're going to be doing some swaling, smallish swaling here to capture as much roof runoff and any runoff from the property as possible to help feed or help hydrate food forestry efforts here in the back fenced area, and feed it into large contoured wood core beds, and finally into a large Sepulcher style hugelkultur mound. Some other earthworks, a very miniature swaling type system to feed some espaliered miniature fruit trees, dwarf fruit trees, and a mound system for growing melons and squashes for winter harvest, melons for the summertime. And in the back we've got another small-scale micro swaling effort to trap just the remnants of the water that might try to make its way off the property, and to feed this back fedge line that's going to be hit the most with the heavy summer sun. We have a small pond to put in here, primarily to provide some predator habitat and just a little extra water holding and a nice view. Some very micro swaling more just to catch that little bit of water that's going to be lost from not having a catchment tank on this side of the house. This sort of the water that isn't directed from the center of the house will be directed over to this side, where it can hydrate some of this other small-scale forestry going on. Another just slow down, slight directive effort to catch any of the water that's coming off of this northeastern quadrant of the house to hydrate some bush plantings of brambles, raspberry, blackberry, that sort of thing, maybe even a filbert. And then pushing it down towards the rest of this forested area and into the larger pond structure. Finishing off the any other earthwork-like structures would be more wood core contoured hugel beds to capture water runoff and to take advantage of the amazing solar aspect that we're going to have throughout this part of the property to get some more annual growth in. All right, let's review some of the structural features then, now that we've looked at the earthworks. We have our garage, which has attached workshop and storage shed areas, a fenced-in small backyard that's been used as a dog run, the main house, and concrete walkway, driveway area. Structures to be added be a hothouse, glasshouse, nursery structure to increase production in the wintertime, the worst parts of winter, and to get a jump start on nursing new plants for the productive growing season. To keep this going, using a solar heat exchanging like water coils on top of the roof with water thermal masses, which will also be run into the storage shed, which will be partially converted to house areas for quail and a small rabbitry to provide some animal protein needs, manures, and eggs primarily. These two animal types are chosen mainly because they have excellent feed conversion ratios and because they are quiet and incredibly unobtrusive. The area isn't super chicken friendly, so these are sort of the best workarounds we have at the moment. The other primary animal elements to be added to the property are bees. I have some areas for bee houses marked out to provide pollination and that wonderful gift of honey. While we're still in the back, we'll look at this the pergola structure that I have planned here, both to provide an excellent sort of shade house environment for plants underneath it, and to take advantage of the extra vertical space to grow some more heat-loving vining plants. And even I could just use some of the upper space to put some heat-loving, high sun-loving potted plants up there if I really wanted to. Additions of trellises on the west side of the building and the south side of the building, and a little bit of extra fencing here to create a nice little microclimate for some shade-loving perennial plants and more tender annuals, and then to take use of that vertical space for some extra vining plants. Down here on the front of the house, we have another pergola structure to take advantage of the summer sun to get some actual growing space out of an area that is basically concrete, and at the same time provide some lovely shade and a great place for friends and family to gather and barbecue and just hang out. A trellised archway, likely 10 to 12 feet in height here on the above the driveway. Will be home to some perennial vining plants, maybe some muscadine grapes, hardy kiwis, things of that ilk. Let's get into some more of the planting then. As you see, I've got marked out a privacy fedge along the entirety of the property. This will serve a couple purposes. One, taking advantage of and creating extra edge space. It'll give us lots of spots to plant some great herbaceous layers underneath all of the shrubs, but many of the shrubs themselves will obviously be productive plants: blueberries, blackberries, Nanking cherry, filberts, even the Osage orange, which I would plan to have most of the northerly edge planted as, to break against our polar northerly winds in the winter. We'll start continuing on some of the plantings on the southern side of the building. As I mentioned, some miniature fruit trees, likely espaliered apples, maybe 2 apples and 2 pears, both providing a little bit of a windbreak for the wind tunnel that'll sort of be created here, and also just to get a little extra production out of the space. Be creating with the hugel mound excellent anchor points for some a little bit larger fruit trees, semi-dwarf varieties, or larger dwarf fruit varieties, that is also going to create some excellent shading for this first contour bed and part of this second contour bed in the second half of the summer days, creating a little bit more of a microclimate for growing a little bit more shade-loving annuals there. It's also going to create an excellent windbreak for our warmer southern winds, to help do a little bit of temperature control in this area. Along the lines of wind control, more dwarfing fruit trees, at least some of them in espaliered pattern along the fence line here, will also create some more windbreak when it comes closer to winter time, and be followed up with larger varieties of fruit trees, taking advantage of the sunlight, being able to strike the shorter trees and the taller trees, and then moving back into a couple of full-size trees, with both the goal of getting that excellent production and during the summer months adding some extra shade cover to the house. As you can see, I have the water lines plotted of how the water's going to be flowing from the swale sills through this forested section down into the contoured beds, and hopefully absorbing as much as possible into the landscape. We have some small structured areas over here, a spot for some compost piles underneath a beautiful flowering dogwood that's already there, and a nice little spot marked out for a larger worm farm than I currently have. This small forested section would primarily be planted with nitrogen fixers to help continue mulching all of this after the companion planting of nitrogen fixers are fading out as the forest here establishes, and to keep us fueled with a little bit of extra wood and in ready supply of woody mulches for all of our other plantings. So this is not primarily for food production, though there may be a fruit tree mixed in here or there. Here we have a coniferous tree that is right at the end of its life cycle. It's beginning to die, so it's unfortunately going to have to be removed soon. So it's time to begin establishing another tree in its lovely area, which will be more of a full-sized fruit tree. Our other main tree plantings are going to be here, where we get excellent solar aspect. Should be able to establish a very miniature, clumpy food forest with more large moving down to smaller fruiting tree varieties. One larger tree here in the middle of our sort of the dip in our pond area, both to create some shade on the pond itself to help to provide some incentive for predators and fish population, and to create an excellent sitting area for us to sit next to the pond. More dwarf or semi-dwarf fruit trees planted at the northern side of the pond to create a windbreak from the northerly winds, and to also bring a little bit of extra shade and southern windbreak to this first contoured bed here. Whereas this large existent maple is going to provide some good shade to these areas of the bed during the second half of the day, where the sun tends to bake things here. Along the side of the house, I have an extra about a 2.5 to 3 foot wide earth planting area that's edged in concrete here. It'll have a full-scale trellis all the way up the wall to get us some extra vertical planting space, planting some alliums and some herbs along the edges, but getting some more vining plants, maybe some cucumbers, even a couple tomatoes, things like that, on the warm western side of the building, which will also provide a little bit of extra shade to that side of the building as well. Another sort of concrete enclosed planting area with a kitchen herb spiraled pattern. I think I didn't mention the addition of a material storage area, just an extra small shed that's easily accessible from the vehicle area, for storing of extra fuel and a few extra tools to reduce the necessity to move things in and out of the original storage shed, and also to set up an area for processing of the livestock as well, to have a designated area for that. This is about an 8-foot diameter mound that's been in production for almost 2 years now. It's built on top of the stump of a dead tree, and has been growing herbs and melons and all sorts of excellent things like that for that time period, being chopped and dropped and over mulched between the seasons. I'd like to turn that into a very large herb spiral that then feeds any of its water runoff into a small predator pond here. And all of the ponds will be planted with some extra bee forage type crops, medicinal herbs, flowering herbs, and predator encouraging plants in general. Take use of the little extra humidity in those areas and encourage as many of those species to move in as we possibly can. As we get close to wrapping up here, let's look at a couple of these other areas that I've lined out, specific areas for the kids to be able to run around and go crazy in. It's something that they need as kids, and having penned the space in a little bit with the fedge, I thought it was wise to leave a few nice spaces where they can just go nuts, play catch, run around, wrestle, do all that sort of thing that boys like to do. And these areas would be planted with creepers and edible ground covers, things that don't mind being trampled a little bit, mints and things like that. I don't really care if they get a little out of hand, as long as they're not killing anything else, then it's all good. While we're going to have the borders along most of the concrete edges planted with spring lily and some other lily bulbs that are being moved from these planting areas. No reason to get rid of excellent pollinator attractors like that, but then adding some things like maybe some fig shrubs and some other good edible border plants, encouraging some strawberries and maybe even some very well pruned Nanking cherries and things like that. Okay, well, I hope this presentation has been clear enough. My voice isn't doing as well as it could be, but I've really enjoyed taking the class, and I hope to see a lot of you out there doing great things in the world.